the biggest thing right now is that they want to get better. And to your point, they have to know who is staying, who's leaving, who's doing what. And even if it's not announced publicly by individual players or what have you, I think they'll have a good idea probably by the end of this week, I would anticipate, about who's doing what. And they can be a little more aggressive because right now, um, there's not a ton in the portal because there was, to your point, a whole bunch of people still playing this weekend. I think by Friday is when you'll see, a jump from, I think there's 1,000. It'll probably jump another 1,000, I would imagine, in the next 3 or 4 days, just because the tournament's over, things are starting to settle, and guys can start figuring out where they want to go. And it's still North Carolina. And no, people don't believe that, especially inside the inside Carolina bubble, because everything seems so rough right now, considering the season they had. But they're still going to attract top players. We know that, I would say you can contact the UNC staff without contacting the UNC staff to let them know that you're interested, if that makes sense. You can like a post on Instagram, or you can talk to your homeboy, but there are ways to kind of like, hey, I'm interested. And it goes on everywhere. And I think that's kind of where things stand now. And from what we can gather, there are definitely people, of value who would help UNC, who are interested. So they obviously had to replace Nance and Leaky, in their starting five, considering that Styles is gone and then Nickel is gone. It seems there's a huge glaring hole at the three that they have to get someone from the transfer portal. It's so
You'll
hard to
you'll
say.
get it right by May. It's fine.
For the transfer portal to start at three. So we know they're looking at a three. They would prefer someone, who has an ability to shoot, who has an ability to drive, to get more offense out of that position. They all obviously are looking for additional help in the post. And if the Timberlake interest, aside from him just being a shooter, is there, then you have to assume that they're okay if the shooter maybe comes at a position that they might already have people at, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So the plan seems to be, multiple guys from the transfer portal to come into UNC, guys who are versatile, guys who are athletic, and guys who can shoot. That's what we can glean so far.
And obviously, it's a moving target, right? Like as players become available, if somebody pops up on North Carolina's radar that they weren't obviously looking at that expresses interest, then things can change. So yeah, this is absolutely a moment in time podcast as much as we wish it were otherwise. Sean, I think some folks see a guy like Nick Timberlake and they're like, yeah, okay, he's from the CAA, and North Carolina's had a couple of transfers in the past from that conference and conferences like that. And people may have, baggage about that, but having seen the first two rounds of this tournament and just understanding what transfers have done for college basketball in general, um, help me understand why that might be a bit of a misnomer and that might be a little bit of jumping the gun.
Yeah, well, a few different thoughts. One, you can go through pretty much all the teams now, and you're looking at, hey, where did these guys come from? And you're seeing, maybe they've been at two different schools before getting to where they are net right now at the Sweet 16. And some of these guys are continuing to move up. Xavier's in my mind as one example right off the top. And then the other, before I kind of go more macro, but you look at Wake Forest and Appleby this year. I don't think anybody this time last year looking at his Florida stats was going to imagine the jump that he could make at Wake Forest and what he did. Um, you know, really for shout out to Wake Forest for what they've done the past 2 years in the transfer portal and the improvements that those players have been made. So I know we get caught looking at what did they do this past year, but so much is about fit and situation. And I think that still is a big question mark as to how could they fit in with UNC, who's coming back, et cetera. But in terms of the CA, obviously Justin Pierce, William Mary played a few years ago. And I think athletically, we knew that was going to be a huge step up, which was a struggle. But there's a few other examples. Michigan State, Tyson Walker. You know, UNC fans got to see him in person at Northeastern early on before he decided to transfer. And even though he was super small, I think CAA Player of the Year or one of the top players, but he went from averaging close to 19 points a game at Northeastern to 8 points per game his first year at Michigan State. Now year number 2, he's up to 14.5. So took, really the first year to get adjusted. He was serviceable, but now really stepping into his own this year, led Michigan State to the Sweet 16. And then you have Cam Winter, a guy who played at Drexel, 6'2" guard, similar accolades of all CAA 2 years in a row. He ended up at Penn State, and he went from 16 points per game to 9 points per game. Once again, for a tournament team, but there has been that drop off. So, for Timberlake, what he was averaging and getting up 6, 8, 10 threes a game, that's not going to happen most likely at a Power 5 school. But I think you look at what does he do really well, and it is moving off the ball. It is quick release, utilizing screens. So once again, is it the dribble handoffs and look at ISO? That's not going to do him well. But if you can work to get him looks, I think it'd be definitely a bigger upgrade than Kerwin Walton, who you needed to do a little bit more to get looks. And I think he can move off the ball. He can once again struggles a little bit in transition, but I think if you find him in the right role, he can do his thing at a Power 5 school. Last thing to add, Sherrell put this in his scoop. I think it was on the Thursday scoop, but it might have got lost in terms of people trying to guess who the player X was going to be that was going to be potentially transferring out. But talked to an assistant coach in the CAA that did pretty well against Timberlake this year as well last year, and he said, hey, he's a really good player, can really catch and shoot with the best of them, whether it's flying off staggers or in transition. And he's got a pretty good mid-range game as well, which we talked about, but not a great finisher around the basket. And if you can stay attached to him through ball screens and off-ball screens, you can limit him. So, that came from a coach that saw him up close and prep for him. But once again, I think it goes into the situation that UNC could potentially put him in, and who are they surrounding him with? In terms of how well he could potentially do next year.
Yeah, and I wanted to add too, Sean. I think folks also have to be careful in looking for in turning it into like a math contest and putting into an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, who averages 15 points? Who averages 40% from 3? Who averages 50% from 2? And who shoots 75%? From the free throw line, filtering out everyone who's not there and say, okay, Carolina needs to pick one of these 6 guys. It doesn't really work that way. I know there are exceptions and there are rules, and I think Ricky Council the fourth could be an exception. I don't know, but Carolina fans are pining for someone like that, a athletic guy who can shoot, who can take over games, and the big bad SEC Arkansas got him, and it's like, he started 7 games at Wichita State last year. So, it's not a situation where he was averaging 20 points a game and someone dropped a huge NIL bag to get this massive star to come to Arkansas. He was a guy at Arkansas who got better over the last year and became the guy in the SEC for a team who just beat a number 1 seed. So I think you have to be careful about looking only at stats. They should be a piece of the puzzle when it comes to trying to figure out how a particular player might fit at Carolina, because if you I need to go look at the roster, but if you go to Wichita State's roster and pick a guy who started 7 games, the fan base, and I think anyone who covers will be like, oh, they can't take that kid. Like, he started 7 games at Wichita State. But you have to look deeper than that. You have to talk to people, and that's why I think Hubert Davis calls it speed dating, is because you have to do all that within like a week or two to really be